I don't think we have 9 times the service level. I don't think we have 40% better service from our public service than we did in 2015. So there appears to be a lot of fat to trim.
Oh, yeah.
So it sounds like there might be some fat to trim. Are they going to have a serious conversation on power play? I don't think so. Let's get into it. They're making jokes about everything. We do need to trim some fat. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Let's get into this.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
All right, gang, let's kick it off with MP Shannon Stubbs. She's a wild cowgirl. She calls him like she sees him. She's very entertaining. Let's see what she has to say.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is using yet another Trudeau-era law to censor you and to censor Canadian companies while he pretends he's different. The Liberal oil and gas censorship law, hidden in Bill C59, rewrote the Competition Act to make it nearly impossible for Canadian businesses to speak about their environmental accomplishments and about their innovation, about their world-class environmental stewardship, unless they echo vague liberal talking points. This liberal censorship law gives liberals the power to slap huge fines on Canadian companies if they go against liberal ideological anti-energy talking points. It targets Canadian producers, manufacturers, and energy developers who fail to meet the liberal values test. Canadian companies and workers now operate in fear that if they speak out, they'll face massive fines. That uncertainty drives investment out of Canada and straight into the United States. In fact, it's already happening. Canadian companies have already taken down environmental references, updates on their environmental work, and news about their environmental innovation from their websites in fear of being fined by the Liberals. Business leaders across Canada have also sounded the alarm. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce called the Liberal oil and gas censorship law unnecessary, and Alberta's Business Council warned it will kill Canadian business ambition and innovation, as if we need more government policies that do that. Now, when I was a kid, I loved the nature of things, but David Suzuki does spread false imagery and smear campaigns against Canadian energy development and Canadian energy workers. So these Canadians in BC stood up and fought back using the very changes Liberals made in Bill C59 to expose Liberal anti-energy talking points. Instead of encouraging Canadian leadership, innovation, and investment, the Liberal oil and gas censorship law lets the government bankrupt Canadian companies that don't echo their anti-energy plans. The reality is the Liberals punish world-renowned Canadian energy industries that lower emissions, create jobs, and power our communities right across the country. Also, they can virtue signal globally to their anti-energy friends and elites. That's why Conservatives will repeal the Liberal oil and gas censorship law and defend your freedom of expression for people, for businesses, and for all Canadians.
All right, guys, Shannon Stubbs is definitely one to watch. Looking forward to seeing her return to the House of Commons. What's next?
Oh, yeah.
I think we'd be better off if Canadian superstars from Hollywood kept their nose out of Canadian federal politics. They're very out of touch. But let's see if we can get Ryan Reynolds here to make us chuckle.
I feel like there was a little bit of a Captain Canada competition happening between you and the Prime Minister, I have to say. A lot of excitement.
Sort of an unfair fight there. Because one day he will no longer be Prime Minister. I knew the Prime Minister before he was the Prime Minister, and he's got a great sense of humor, and oh man, he crushed. I said to Colin Hanks, my partner on this, on the John Kennedy doc, I said, in the immortal words of Jerry Lee Lewis, never follow a killer. He did a little too well.
Here with a power play here with Vassy Kapelos. She has a panel. I think this one is going to go off the rails. There should be some unexpected moments. They're discussing the budget. Where is the budget? Carney keeps on promising all of this money, giving it out to other nations, new programs, whatever. Where is that money going to come from? Let's see if we can get any answers.
The Prime Minister
at all.
is set to deliver a budget next month, and he gave a preview of sorts last week, saying in French that it would be a budget of both austerity and investment. In his own election platform, however, the Prime Minister committed to maintaining some big government spending line items, including protecting key Trudeau-era programs like childcare, dental care, pharmacare, and school food programs, protecting transfers to people and governments, and capping the public service, not cutting it. The front bench is back to talk about how that might all unfold. We've got Laura Stone, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Dan Moulton here. Kathleen, I'll start with you. This is going to be a really interesting policy exercise, but also communications exercise, because it is interesting that that word austerity was used in French. And since then, it's just been us basically asking whomever the government can put up, what exactly is that going to mean?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, the line was so clear from the election platform, caps, not cuts. But in fact, the cuts that Carney has laid out, or his finance minister has laid out, of 7.5, 10 to 15, is far greater than we even ever saw from the Stephen Harper government, who asked to cut 5 to 10% over 3 years.
And did so incrementally.
We didn't need as many cuts then, bozo.
Incrementally, exactly. Yeah. And let's just remember what those cuts under the Harper years did. That meant a $36 billion cut to healthcare. That meant that veterans who returned from Afghanistan didn't get the supports they need. That means certain veteran offices closed. There were cuts to CFIA. The list goes on and on. That's when we brought in the famous Phoenix systems for cost savings, right? That turned into be an absolute blunder and has cost the government and taxpayers so much money. So we're now asking public servants to cut much deeper, much greater, but within the same timeline of 3 years. And I think it's actually going to be really, really, really stark if Carney does pivot away from what he promised the campaign, which was, frankly, just a cap, not a cut. I think that anyone can acknowledge that, sure, everyone can do a little belt tightening, including myself. But it's but I think that, but the deepness that he's doing and so quickly he's doing is really going to drive off that left flank that went and he attracted all those new Democrat and left-leaning voters. Well, maybe they go back to, inshallah,
here's Kathleen's dream sequence. They're going to go back to the, okay.
That's right.
Right. Dan?
Come on, girls, pull it together. Let's conduct this thing somewhat professionally, some giggle fest.
And I'll throw that, I love how you just stopped talking at that point, yeah. Dan, I'll throw that over to you. I guess, I think the Prime Minister made no secret of the fact that he would be looking at the finances in a different way than his predecessor. I think it was one of the main ways he tried to differentiate himself during the campaign, and did so pretty pointedly at times, criticizing the economic record of the Trudeau government. How do you anticipate, though, they will lay the groundwork for? It won't just, I'm teasing Kathleen, but there are a lot of unions at the ready right now, even after that interview with Wayne Long, the union that represents the people who work for the CRA, et cetera, et cetera. There will be opposition to at least what they've said sounds like might be possible, if in fact that's what materializes. What kind of groundwork do you think they're going to be laying?
Well, I think the groundwork is being laid, right? I think the leaks over the course of the summer have been trying to set a certain expectation of what spending reductions might look like. And it remains to be seen whether or not that magnitude will actually be delivered in what we see from the finance minister this fall, or even in future documents from the federal government in the spring of next year. So let's wait to see the extent to which they actually bring forward reductions on that scale. I do think Canadians elected the government to clean up some of the finances in Ottawa and deal with some of the spending. They've been clear about the need to address that. What I'm watching for most closely in this budget and in future budgets from this government is the extent to which they follow on some of the Liberal platform commitments around restructuring how public finances are handled in this country, right? The Prime Minister has talked before he was Prime Minister and since he was elected about moving to a spending approach that differentiates between capital and program spending at the federal level, and changing how budgets are structured and how they have been in the past. That would, I think, facilitate the kind of approach he's talking about when he looks at being able to reduce program spending but continue to make the right kind of investments that are necessary to stimulate the Canadian economy and ensure that Canadians are well off, right? That approach is very different than how finances are typically handled and would mean, I think, pretty seismic change. So I'll be watching very closely to the extent to which we see that profiled in the budget in a few weeks' time.
I'm also watching closely because I've pitched my husband that my spending on purses will now be an investment because they accrue extra value over time.
That's true.
It's a big joke, right? Come on. It's not a joke, guys. They keep making these investments. Where are they going to get that money from? It's going to be money that causes more headaches and inflation for Canadians. As simple as that. But it's a big joke to Vassy.
Fingers crossed it works as well. It is. Thank you, Larissa. I appreciate the support. What are your thoughts on this? Not the purses, the actual political dynamic.
No, there are many purses, and everybody can Google that increase in value, and that is crazy. So I want to actually speak to something Kathleen said about, comparing the cuts that Carney's proposing versus the Harper era cuts. The difference is there's so much more to cut. The broader public service increased 40% since 2015. At the CRA, we have 60,000 employees versus the IRS that has 80,000 employees, and they have 9 times our population. I don't think we have 9 times the service level. I don't think we have 40% better service from our public service than we did in 2015. So there appears to be a lot of fat to trim. What I want to also bring up is to Dan's point that this Prime Minister is going to be so much different in how he approaches finances. We had to peer pressure him into doing a fall budget. He wasn't going to do one. And somebody who doesn't understand the importance of transparency and telling the electorate what you're going to do, how much you're going to spend, where you're going to make the investments, I have very little confidence that he's going to actually read the room here. He wants to talk about big projects and big programs and, the national interest stuff, and it's all been great on paper. We haven't seen anything happen in real life. And I think if you look at the youth, for example, that Pierre Poilievre is speaking to, they don't want another program. They just want the opportunity to get a job and buy a house and live their Canadian dream. I think that Mark Carney doesn't understand that. And so I'm really interested to see what's in this budget, and I'm really interested to see how he's going to communicate it to people who are feeling real hurt right now and who feel left behind by sort of the thinking process of this Liberal government.
I've got 1 minute on the dot, Laura. It's all yours.
I think Mr. Carney's probably kicking himself that he agreed with the language of the French reporter in the Scrum last week who used the words austerity and that he repeated. I'm sure he would not have personally chosen that terminology because it does have very negative connotations. I think in the minds of the public, I think at this moment, he still does have a lot of legitimacy in the economic and financial space because of his background and his experience. I think there's a lot riding on the budget and expectations will be very high as to exactly how the government's going to fulfill its lofty mandate. I find it interesting that the Conservatives' argument is that they actually don't think he's going to pursue austerity enough. They don't actually believe that he's going to make these cuts. So I think that actually might, put the government in a bit of a fortunate position because they may be feeling squeezed from both sides, and that's where they like to be. They like to ride the middle. So we really won't know what this kind of unclear mumbo jumbo of austerity and investment really means until that budget is tabled. But I think they may be able to pull it off just because they'll be feeling squeezed from both sides of the political spectrum.
We shall see. My cheesy.
I guess we shall see. Vassy's making jokes about purses when our pockets are being drained. There seem to be 1, maybe 2 sensible people on that panel. Power play. What a joke, right?
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
All right, gang, we're going to wrap it up right there. Thank you all very much for tuning in. We're covering Canadian federal politics. Get yours right here. My name's Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. That's it. Thank you very much for watching the video. We'll catch you in the next one. We've got to keep a close eye on these Liberals. They're sneaky. Till next time, gang, we're out.